Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to another mod with me, where we create a deep and meaningful bond with the cards through creative expression and deck modification. Today we'll be creating a pocket-sized version of the EDSA Tarot. The EDSA is one of my favorite tarot decks. It lives in my quick reach basket where all my favorite working decks find a home. It is a deck that I often turn to when I need some down-to-earth guidance, or when I really need to dig into the emotional undercurrent of a situation. It's a deck that I often use for family readings, for insights into those often complicated relationships. It is a deck that I like to keep on hand, a deck that brings me comfort even when it delivers the uncomfortable truth. It is a deck that is often my companion when I travel. It has been on many family vacations and camping trips with friends. It often comes out to play with my beloved Llewellyn. Its darker tone, both in palette and energy, create a beautiful balance to the sunnier Llewellyn. Though I frequently use them both together, at home and on the road, I find myself wishing that my EDSA was smaller, closer in size to my trim Llewellyn. With smaller cards, I could do larger spreads on the small confines of my trailer table. But when I'm home, when I'm using the EDSA on its own, or with other decks or oracles, I want the bigger version, complete with the black borders and matching black edges. I couldn't bring myself to trim this version. I loved it just the way it was, and I knew that as much as I love trimming decks, I could never take my blade to it. So what did I do? Why, I ordered a second copy, of course. As a mass market deck, it's among one of the more affordable tarots, so it wasn't a stretch to order another deck so that I could turn this one into my pocket edition and still leave my original EDSA unharmed. I began this process by trying to determine exactly what I wanted to trim. I knew that I wanted the cards to be roughly the same size as my Llewellyn, as they are often traveling partners. To be perfectly honest, I had a few false starts with this deck modification. I probably should have planned things a little bit better, but once I get the bug to do something to my decks, I have a tendency to just jump right in. This means that while my mods usually end up as I envision them, sometimes it takes me a while to get there. I did some measurements, even made a template in an effort to determine the best way to go about this process. I really wanted to maintain as much of the image on the back as possible because it is one of my favorite aspects of this deck. However, it was more important to ensure that I was getting the cards the size I wanted, specifically the same size as my Llewellyn, so I ended up just using that as my template. The first thing I did was try to determine how much I could cut off each side in order to get the card roughly the same size as my Llewellyn. I compared that to the back to make sure that I would be getting it fairly even with the image on the back. I made a slight adjustments to my measurements to line things up and then noted how much I needed to take off my first side. I used my handy washi tape to mark my first cut and create a guideline for the rest of my cards. I decided to do this deck 2 sides at a time, to take the width down first and then readjust my measurements for the length later. Rather than relying on my poor measuring skills for my second cut, I used my actual Llewellyn card to set the guide for my second cut. I added another piece of washi tape to mark my cut for the Though it may be more time consuming to use measurements and guides when trimming a deck, it does give you a much better result. I might just have to do that from here on out. As this cardstock is pretty thin and doesn't give my rounder or my hand much trouble, I was able to sit and corner around all 78 cards in one go while watching some of my favorite tarot YouTubers. The next step was to go through the process of determining which marker and color I wanted to use. I used the excess pieces I had trimmed off to test each marker on this particular cardstock. I was looking not only for color and saturation, but also kept an eye out for unwanted bleed. I originally edged this deck first with my brown Crayola, and although I really like the color this marker gives, after doing several decks with it, it was starting to run dry. I did one coat on the entire deck and then realized that this particular marker wasn't going to make it. So I went back over the deck a second time using my vintage photo distress stamp to help fill in those gaps that the worn marker had left behind. The color turned out a deep and rich brown, a beautiful accent to this earthy deck and a wonderful contrast to the yellow of my Llewellyn. Now that this modification is complete, let's take a quick peek at the newly trimmed cards in comparison to the originals. So here we have the Fool, and you can see that we didn't lose a ton on the top or the sides. We mostly just lost a little bit of his foot here on the bottom. So next we have the Magician, and again, we didn't lose anything terribly important, just a little bit of the bottom. Of course, that's going to be the case on all of these because I trimmed all four sides. But you can see that we just lost a little bit of the pillar, but all the important elements I think are still there. Here we have the High Priestess. We did lose a little bit of the moon at top, and we lost quite a bit, well, all of the water. But that's okay because I do know these cards really well, and I know that that is down there and a part of this image, so I don't think that will impede me any. Here with the Empress, we really didn't lose a ton of important details. I don't think the animals are still pretty much all represented. We kept her bare feet, which is great. We really just lost a little bit of the bottom and some of the tree up top. With the Emperor, I don't think we really lost anything important. Just a little bit of the outlining design there. The rest of it, all of the main images is still intact. The same with the High Priest. All the main elements are still there. Again, with the Lovers, the dog's face did get cut off a little bit, but to me that's not a really important part of the card. The actual older couple in the card is the main focus, so that's all intact, which is great. Same with the Chariot, everything is intact. We did lose a little bit of the trees and a little bit of the whip up there, but that's, again, all the main elements still there. Same with Justice. And again with the Hermit. So for the most part, we're not losing anything terribly important. We did lose a little bit of this person's head and a little bit of this person's body, but you still can see the idea of the person falling off the wheel and the person climbing back up the wheel. So I think all the important elements are still there, even though we've lost a little bit here and there. Strength card is really stayed pretty well intact. And with the Hangman, we just lost a little bit of his head, but that's okay. We still definitely get that Hangman sense. With the Death, we lose a little bit of the Scythe, but we can still see it, so we do know it's still there. So with Temperance, we did lose a little bit of the water down at the bottom, which I was a little bit sad to see that get cut off. But we do still have the water here represented in her bowl, so I think that does actually still work quite well. With the Devil, everything is pretty much maintained. We have a few of the people that have gotten a little bit cropped, but again, you can still get the energy of the card. The Tower remained pretty much intact. We just lost a little bit of the water. All the figures were actually maintained as well. With the Star, same case, just lost a little bit of the water in the sky, as well as the same with the Moon. The Sun, I think, came out gorgeous. We just lost a little bit of the background, but we still have all the sunflowers, a little houses, and of course the sun itself. And Judgment, I think, maintained really well. We just lost some of the background images, but all the figures are there and pretty well intact. With the World, again, it's fairly intact. We lost a little bit of the moons on either side and a little bit of this underneath world, but again, it's still all primarily there. The main elements are still represented. Here we have the cups. Again, most of the image is still there. Same with the 2 and the 3. So as you can see, throughout most of the cards, the elements were still maintained. Now here in this one, this is a good example. We did lose this 1 cup here. So we do kind of only have 3 cups on this card now because we've lost the 2 here, the 1 in the background and the 1 on the side. But we actually have some cups here. So we do have, if you count these actual broken ones, we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cups. In this card, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cups, which I always thought was kind of funny. So this is actually a more, I think, a more cohesive representation because there are actually 5 cups. It wouldn't matter anyway. I know this deck so well that it could have no cups in it, and as long as it had this figure in this scene, I would know what card that was. Here with the 6, we did lose one of this cup here down at the bottom. Again, I know the card so well that I know that this is the 6 of the cups based on the character and the scene portrayed. I think we do maintain a sense of all 7 cups here. We have 4 here. We can see just the edge of the 4th and the 3 up top. And the figure is very well pretty much contained within that card. Same case with this one. I did lose a piece, most of one of the cups. It is still there, but again, like I said, I don't need the symbols to know what these cards are. It's more about the figures and the scenes depicted. Gorgeous 9 of cups still remained pretty much intact. Again, lose some of the cups. Definitely see that here in the 10. We do not have 10 cups here now on this card, but that's okay because I know this is the 10 of cups. And I think when you know a deck really well like this, you don't need to necessarily keep all of those to maintain that each of those symbols are on the card. If you know the figures in the card and you know the scene that's being depicted, you could take the cup out of her hand and I would still know that that is the Queen of Cups. But as you can see, for the most part, the images have remained intact. So just flip through the rest of these pretty quickly. We did lose, he lost his nose, but seems as to me he's not really the focus of the card. It's more of the fact of that he's leaving these 2 swords behind. He has these 2 swords are still here and they are still intact and he's leaving behind. We still get that sense even though I chopped off his nose. So you can see through all of the cards, you know, we do maintain the majority of the image. These cards are a bit glossy, so they're kind of sliding everywhere. I have noticed that the smaller, my trimmed version doesn't seem to slide around quite as much as my full-size version. We did lose a little bit of her head there, but we still have her face with that beautiful expression. We did lose the extra arrow here, but I think we still get that same sense. He does still look like he's making a decision. So even though we've lost that 1 arrow, it still works. I think we might be short a rod in this one, but again, I know the image so well that I don't need the rod. Whoops. Okay, all fixed. For some reason, I had my pentacles and my rods were half switched around. Here with the 9 of rods, we do maintain all 9 rods, so that works. The 10 of rods, we did get most of this one cut off, but I think you could still see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are still 10 of them there, so that works. real quickly, just flip through the rest of them here. And you can see that for the most part, the integrity of the cards has been primarily, they get hard to pick up here at the end. So our Queen and our Kings. And we can see that we're really just losing mostly background in a lot of these images. So there you can see that there is quite a bit of a size difference now. Because I pretty much just took the center for the most part of the card so that I could maintain as much of the back as possible. I did lose the two moons on either side, but you know, I'm okay with that. This is going to be a travel version, a pocket version, so I'm okay with it being a little bit not quite as intact as this one, because again, like I said, I know these cards so well, it really doesn't bother me at all. Oops. So you can see it here in comparison to my Llewellyn now, and they just, you know, why is that one upside down? They just look really beautiful together. So let's go ahead and give these a little shuffle and see how they work. They still, even though I've made them mini, because they're this thinner Llewellyn cardstock, which I actually really like. I wish it wasn't quite so glossy, but I really do like the cardstock. They do shuffle. Like, I can still rifle shuffle. I can still bridge. So while I lost a little bit here and there in the images, I still adore this pocket-sized version of the Anna Kay. It's the perfect size for travel and the perfect size to pair with my Llewellyn. So whether at home or on the road, I have the perfect Anna Kay for every occasion. So thank you for joining me for this mod with me. You will find links for the decks and products that I've used in this video in the description box below, along with links for my deck modification tutorials and my Mod With Me playlist. I hope you enjoyed this process and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.